There's another down at the bottom, says all requiring recordation of title, Title 18 USC, Chapter 47, Section 1021. You can look those up at your leisure. Next page, Title 18 241. And the real estate lady that was here, I don't know if she's still here or not, but was addressing the issue of what is color of title. This gives you a very good description of what happens when you're representing something of color of title. Okay? First one is conspiracy against rights. The second one, Title 18, Section 242, is deprivation of rights under color of law. Getting back to this lady's question earlier. Listen to what that said. Deprivation of rights under color of law. Whoever, under color of any law, statute, ordinance, regulation, or custom, willfully subjects any person to the state, territory, commonwealth, possession of the district of deprivation of any right, privilege, or immunity secured or protected by the Constitution or the laws of the United States. Stop. Where's your patent title come from, folks?
United States.
What did that just say? The Constitution, didn't it?
Yeah.
Okay? You starting to see the protective covenants here? I hope you grasp that. Very important. Protected by the United States Constitution or the laws of the United States. Okay? How many of you here know what the word vested means? Vested right. Back there, a few of you. A vested right, and it's important that you remember this. Vested right means that the right comes by way of law. L-A-W. Vested right also has the protective covenant by law. In other words, for a judge or the state legislatures or some regulatory person that comes along and tries to infringe upon that, there's a federal offense under Title 18, Section 241 and 242. Vested right is protected by law because it is initiated by law. You have to change the law. And it wouldn't matter anyway because the vested right can't be taken away from you. You can't have a ex post facto, law. In other words, to go back retroactive and take something away from you.
Unless you're Obama.
Yeah. Yes.
That sounds good, but what happens when you get plugged into administrative law and that your concept is trumped?
Yeah.
You call him.
Did he hear you? Maybe didn't hear you.
That's
Okay.
identifying.
I want to move on quickly.
The court you're in first before you do anything. Hopefully.
To the page 134, and I just want to make reference to it. Land pledge is unlawful. There's a number of enactments by the United States that pledged your land under a special collateral for foreign debt. Have no authority to do that. Unconstitutional to do it, and on and on. You can read for yourself. Want to go to page 138? Called Federal Jurisdiction. United States versus Babbitt. Very interesting case. Courts establish the principle that federal jurisdiction extends only over the areas wherein it possesses the power of exclusive legislation. And this is the principle incorporated into the subsequent decision, recognize the extent of the federal jurisdiction to hold or otherwise would destroy the purpose and the intent of the meaning of the entire United States Constitution. Another court case, United States versus Babbitt. You're saying, what is that saying? It's telling you that they have very, very limited authority and jurisdiction. Okay? I don't know how many people here in Montana have been affected by actions and claims and documents by the EPA or the Forest Service or the BLM. Have no standing. The Supreme Court confirmed that the purpose for acquiring land within the state is limited to defense. In other words, they're redefining here again and also reaffirming this book called the Constitution about the limits of government. That's why this book is so thin. It gives them very, very... Yes, ma'am.
I got to ask, what are your thoughts on the Kleppe decision then?
I'm sorry.
I want to ask what your thoughts are on the Kleppe decision that seemed to completely subvert all of this.
Well, I won't say that there aren't decisions that have come down that contradict that. In those cases, it is specified in many, many court cases that if it's in violation of this, then it's notwithstanding. Is that your question?
Yeah, I think Kleppe's the one that's causing us all the problems. It's a more current decision that basically says the federal government can do whatever they want.
Well, they cannot do that.
I know. I know.
And especially in your position, you're aware of that. There is in the government circles what's called presumption. It's also used in the courts. You're presumed to be something until you counter it. The very point you made about the court case, they're claiming that the government can do anything. Let me see if I have it to give you an example. Somewhere I've got. Oh, anyway. The United States Congress in 1976 implemented an act, an unlawful act that has no standing. And you guys are going to identify with what I'm going to tell you. Have you heard of FLPMA?
Yes.
Federal Land Policy Management Act? I can tell you from 45 years of research in law, that enactment is totally unlawful and unconstitutional. What that did, need to rest my back on that, is self-proclaim your land to government ownership. They said, we've just decided we're going to keep this federal land.
Public land.
You and I know that it's public land, but they're claiming that it's now federal land. Federal means corporate. They cannot go and take what belongs to you, the people. I'm going to ask you the question, why not? What have you learned here today why they cannot do that? I want to have a little test here.
No title. 432.
Why can they not do it?
Not theirs to take.
Because we're the king.
Because they're a
Remember we were sharing with you about the issue of treaties?
Yeah.
Treaties? All the land acquisitions in the United States came by treaties. Congress and their own cannot annul that treaty. That's why the courts are bound. That's why the constitutional right of ownership of land has been so sacred and so secure for all of these years. They're trying to dismantle it, and that's because we haven't stood up. But to get back to your question, and you posed a very good question, and that is the fact that seems to counter this. It does, as far as the appearance of it. But I can tell you in law, I'm talking about in law now, not within government policy or government intent or whatever. That has no standing, that case. You cannot, by law, encumber your people's land without your consent. Now, having said that, if there was an issue brought up of which they asked you, the people, to vote on, to allow them to do that, now that can be done under that auspices. Why then could it be done under that provision and not the other? Why is that? It's your land.
Consent to the government.
Pardon?
The Congress is the one that passed that act, the Flipman Act.
That's correct.
So our elected representatives did that to it.
But they did it in a corporate capacity. They did it in a corporate capacity. They did it under the federal government. You and I are not bound by the corporate rules and regulations unless you will. Remember the city of Dallas versus Mitchell Case I read? See, we've been indoctrinated that we're subject to all that stuff. There's an element of law called tacit agreement. It means that you're in agreement by your silence. The passage of that was done not under a constitutional mandate and authority, but it was done under the corporate framework of a color of law Congress. And maybe I shared this with you before. We do not have a lawful person in our government. The states, when they incorporated, absolutely warred against the Constitution. The state of Oregon is a corporation. The state of Montana is a corporation. Then the counties incorporated so that they could get money. Then the cities incorporated so that they could get money. But all the time, the octopus's arms went out and out and out. And there isn't but 1/2 of 1% of the people who know or understand what I just said. And I'm not saying that to try to act like a smart aleck. That's not my point at all. You do not have a lawful government under a constitutional republic until you function as a republic. And you voice your vote, and your voice through your vote, the people who are accountable to you and to that constitutional document. We have people today taking oaths of office and given their oath to obey the Constitution and defend the enemies, foreign and domestic, and then turn around and they violate everything they gave their oath to. And I'm telling you, that's a moral sin. It's as ugly as it comes. It's deprivation of rights under color of law. Because it is not law. It's corporate rules and regulations. And we better understand that. I got court cases galore that will support that. But if you just read your Constitution, it tells you that. The Commonwealth of Delaware wrote the first sentence in that because it did not have that originally until it went to be ratified. If you notice the writings on that, we the people is tilted the other direction. You look at the document. Go and look at your Constitution. I want you to read that document. I want you to memorize the Constitution. Get a little packet, put it in your purse, put it in your pocket, and memorize it. Because it empowers you. Knowledge is power. Knowledge properly applied is wisdom. But you have to decide which of the three people are you. You got some movers and shakers in here. And I hope you don't have many people who just watch things happen. And I pray to God there's no one that just wonders one day what happened to our republic. Yes?
Would you agree that every sovereign has the unlimited right to contract and that everybody has the right to contract their rights away under the Constitution?
Yes, they
Would you
do.
also agree that 99 out of 100 people have done that, either
Yes.
unknowingly or knowingly?
But see, that voids the contract. And this lady can tell you, if you do not do a proper disclosure, like in a land sales contract thing, and there is misrepresentation to that, there can be serious consequences with that. At least that is in Oregon, and I'm assuming that is in Montana.
But would you agree the contract is only void if you void it by your own declaration?
That is
Because
correct.
you can't accept that. If you don't void it, it stands, right?
You can void it on the basis that you were not properly informed about what the terms and conditions was of whatever transpired.
But if you don't do it, it stands.
That is
when
correct.
you go into an administrative court, they will take silent judicial notice. They will have the presumption that you have not voided the contract, and
That
they
is
will
correct.
rule against you 100% of the time. I can guarantee it.
That's why I encourage people in many situations to do, and I've got all the documents called revocation of signature. And it's a revocation of signature for cause. And you name what the cause is. I got the template. I'll send them to Rex and do an affidavit of sovereignty, not citizenship, but sovereign. There's also been a great debate on the issue about United States citizens. How many United States citizens do we have in here? I'm not pointing fingers. Let me tell you why.
Which of the three definitions in the United States are you talking about?
I'm talking about the present United States. The corporate United States. Okay? Then there is issue in some of the publications and stuff you find on the internet, well, you need to be a state citizen. Well, if you live in the state, you are a state citizen. But your authority and jurisdiction is that you are an American citizen. Okay? An American citizen. Be careful what you identify yourself with. And I don't mean to be facetious, but can I pick on you a little bit? Is that? Yeah. When you acknowledge by virtue of your voter registration, and you acknowledge by the fact of not doing a revocation on your Social Security, and you acknowledge the fact of your driver's license, and you acknowledge the fact of your zip code, you are confirming that you are a slave to the federal corporation. Sorry to bear that news, but that's a fact of the matter.
How do you undo that?
Pardon?
How do you undo that all?
Do revocation of your signature bills. I helped the lady do it on the, what'd you find? Got the letters? You have a right to travel anywhere in the world being you. That's a God-given right. This binds you to the corporate jurisdiction. And especially with the unlawful and the unconstitutional passage of the Patriot Act. Boy, you talk about trying to gut us from groin to eyeball. That enactment did. But it also is unlawful, yes.
So by using a driver's license, a social security number, or being a registered voter, claiming your U.S. citizenship, would you be committing fraud by trying to go for a land patent?
No. No. In fact, land patents are only applicable in the true sense of law, having to do with the true sovereign. This lady over here addressed from Black's Law Dictionary what a sovereign is. I shared with you what a sovereign is. Are you a king of your life? Are you a king of your land? You have to answer that question. It's your decision. Yes.
Well, right here, right above the perjury jurat, on number 6, when a lawfully qualified sovereign American individual has claimed title and is challenged, I would like to know what a disqualified sovereign American individual is. Now you can tell the difference.
One who's a corporate subject. When you yield to the corporate jurisdiction, your sovereignty by virtue of law, not by creation, but by law, is slid right off the table.
So you're going to disqualify yourself from this by using Social Security, contracting with the IRS.
Technically, yes.
All right.
I just did an IRS class in one of the law classes that I'm teaching. Amazing what these people found out, the stuff I presented. About 60% of the people sat there with their mouth open. All this IRS garbage does not apply to you. And if we were to do a class on it, I can prove it. Right from the Internal Revenue's own book, it describes who's the taxpayer. It describes what is taxable and what is exempt. Your wages is not taxable. You're saying what? Your wages are not taxable. The reason being is that that's a barter. That's not an income. You've traded what you have for something that somebody else, and the two of you agreed to make that exchange. That is not by the lawful definition or even legal definition. Legal and lawful are different, by the way. The very fact that you do not have an income on that basis, and let alone a taxable income. Okay? That's a whole other subject for another day. But the very point that I'm making to you is that we get sucked into these things. You know, a 1040 form is nothing. That's not a legal document. Did you know that? It's a form number of a paper that's printed up. That's all a 1040 form is. When you sign that, you volunteer to pay, and you volunteer to be subject to, and you volunteer to be a debtor. Your power of your signature is mighty, folks. It's mighty. Yes, sir.
So, I'm your son sitting on your couch in your
You need to speak up a little bit, I'm sorry.
I'm your son, and I'm sitting on the couch in our living room. And
if you were my son, you wouldn't be sitting on the couch playing. Just kidding. I'm sorry.
You're gonna, I've got a Social Security card I'm supposed to sign because I'm 18, and I've got a driver's license. I'm going to start to drive. There's positives and negatives. I've been told, you never be able to get a job here and there. Be able to vote, you never be able to run for office. Can we talk about your advice along those lines?
Be glad to.
Yeah.
Number one, what I would instruct you if you were my son in that situation, I would send a letter to the Department of Motor Vehicles, and I would say, please provide me the lawful requirement for me to have a driver's license if I'm just going to be traveling in my own personal person. Then I would go to the Social Security, and I would send them a letter and say, by what lawful authority do you have that obligates me to get a Social Security number? And you're going to find some very interesting stuff that's going to come back at you. And I can tell you, none of it is lawful. Okay? Every agency or entity of which you think that you're required to apply for, you send them a demand notice. I've learned in law, when I was going to law school, whenever there is a challenge made to me and to my right under constitutional law, I spin it around. I learned that. It took me about 4 months to get that through my thick head. And my constitutional professors come up and get me on the head. He said, have you got it yet? And I said, what am I supposed to get? He said, you put the burden on the opposition. You always put the burden on them. They're demanding something from you, I demand something from you. And I'm not going to comply to yours because I can't until you give me what I've demanded from you. Slams the brakes on real quick. And that's what I did to the Department of Geology and Mineral Industries. Had another guy helping me with that too. Very sharp guy, sharp. We have to decide whether we're going to be a slave or we're going to be a king. It's your choice. Okay?
So,
yes, sir.
I'd like to point out that because we have the unlimited right to contract, there's 100 ways that we contract away our sovereignty. And so because we live in a police state, you have to know what they recognize and they will respect. Because if you don't and you claim to be a sovereign and you go into court and you are taking the benefits of the system, they will put you in jail. Because they will take silent judicial notice that you're cheating, that you want the benefits, but you don't want to pay the consideration. And it's always tied to a Social Security number. And if you don't want to pay the consideration, if you don't want to be under the rules, you can't take the consideration. And so the remedy is to not use a Social Security number, to annul it for constructive fraud, to put your Declaration of Sovereignty in the public record. It stands as absolute fact, and they will respect it under the Foreign Sovereign Immunities Act of 1976.
Can I add to that?
That's the only way they respect it.
That's correct.
Otherwise, you will go to jail with your straw man.
Well, what they do in those instances, that the proper jurisdiction has not been brought forward, and that's what you're saying. And that's true. That's why you need to learn what you're doing. Doesn't take forever, but build your foundation. Yes, sir.
I don't mean to shed a negative light on this. It's inspiring, but at the same time, there's the real world. And the real world today, if you go down to Flathead Electric and try to put utilities in your home without a Social Security number, you can't get anywhere. You can't turn on the...
I have done it numerous times.
How do you do it?
I do it by putting a demand. When they refuse me, then I start challenging with a threat that now I'm going to sue you under Title 18.
There's always a remedy. They will not tell you. You have to go and tell them how to do it.
They don't want you to know that you have a remedy.
Without a Social Security number, but they won't tell you how. You have to tell them that you want it, and then it works. You can get everything without a Social Security number. You have to know how, and it is possible.
Yes.
My chiropractor, she, her parents were very awake, and they never did the paperwork for her to get a Social Security number. She does not have one. She's never had one, and she has a letter stating reasons why or how she did it. But she's a doctor today, and she doesn't have to have. She doesn't do banking now. That's the only thing she doesn't do is banking. But she's living fine.
I read just 2 days ago, wasn't it, Jason, that I read the thing to you about the Social Security number? Wasn't it you sitting at the table with your dad and I when I read that? You might not remember it, but I have the documents. When they demand a Social Security number, I take my documents there that comes right out of the Code of Federal Regulations, and I said, show me the counter to that. That law says I'm not allowed to have a Social Security number unless I'm a federal agent on a federal business for the benefit of government.
If you take one, you become a federal agent, and all your business is federal, and they do have jurisdiction.
But you don't become a federal, you're presumed to be a federal agent. There's a difference. But I understand the point you're making. Yes?
How do you get out from underneath it?
Pardon?
How do you get out from underneath it?
Don't use it.
No, but you send a notice of revocation relative to the Social Security. That's what I did with the driver's license thing.
And that applies to everything, your driver's license?
Well, you have to do it to each agency.
So
Yeah.
I want to go not paying taxes anymore. I can
Do it certified mail, return receipt requested.
So what
Proves
happens
it there.
to those people that are in jail right now because they don't pay their taxes? what's the difference between the person sitting in jail and, you know, this guy here decides he's going to stop paying his taxes?
Well, what I would do if they ever did arrest me, I will have some people on the platter. They might arrest me. That can happen. But I'll tell you what, it's going to be one of the worst things they ever did. Because I know how to come at them. And I will come at them. Another question, yes.
I rescinded my federal contracts 30 years ago. I paid the IRS what was due, and I sold my corporation $100,000 or so. And they sent me back a bill for $4.34 or what it was. So I sent them a crisp $5 bill and a certified letter with the serial number of the bill on there. And the dummy sent me back a check for 60-some cents.
Yeah.
And I have that today.
Yeah.
But I was subpoenaed to testify in Connecticut against the guy I knew. So I flew out there, and the prosecuting attorney wanted to run a make on me before he put me on the stand. I asked him to subpoena me so I could cover it, and he did. And so when he went to run a make on me, he asked for my social, and I said, I don't have one. He says, everybody's got to have one. I said, listen, I joined the Navy with a military service number, not a social number. And I said, but everybody has a date of birth, and I have one too. Would you like that? So he ran a make on me and come back, and he says, who the hell are you? I had, right off NCIC, there was no social security number on there, and it said file closed.
Yeah.
And that came from the FBI, so I know it works. I know it works, but there's a price you pay for not having it too,
Well,
believe me. But you have to make your decision. Are you going to be a slave?
Exactly. I want to state, and I think you folks already know, this process is not easy, and it's not without its lumps and bumps. And again, you have to decide what it is that you want to do. You want to bring your land patent forward, tremendous benefit, but there is a setback. You can't get a mortgage loan or the people are going to buy it. I want you to know that. If you do a land patent and there is somebody to challenge, you may have to defend it in court or have somebody defend it for you. Like I said earlier, the Constitution is not a self-executing document. How many of you are familiar with Gideon in the Bible, the story of Gideon's army? I believe in my own heart that that's what God is asking to be brought up in what I do. And I'm not saying that to pat me on the back, that's not even the issue. But I'll tell you something I have found, and I shared with Rex and his son, Jason, and also with this gentleman here, I'm trying to think of his first name. But it's amazing God has brought... Pardon? Joel, thank you. Sorry about that. But God has surrounded me with some incredible people. I prayed about it, and all of a sudden they started showing up. And I'm going, wow, where did you come from? Oh, I heard about you there. I'm trying to do this. I got to sit down with it. My bad. And God keeps blessing. And I feel that what I do is at the direction and the guiding hand of the Lord to come and share with you what it is that I have to offer. And so I just want to mention that you have to make your own decision here. I want to open this up for additional questions of anything that you'd like to ask. Whatever, we've got about 45 minutes or maybe a little less. We got to be out of here by 5. Is there any questions? If not, I've got some more stuff I can cover, whatever your pleasure is. Yes?
Could you do a contract for deed? Would that be a way to sell?
I'm sorry?
Could you use a contract for deed if you wanted to sell your property and people could not finance?
Yes.
You
Yes.
can do it for sale by owner then.
Yeah.
And transfer things.
Right. Yes.
Say that
Yeah.
your children inherit what you have, and they just
decide to sell it, and the people only do a mortgage, so the land patent is forfeited at that point. And, but what can the succeeding buyers of that property, can they go back and use the information and reinstate another land tax?
Yes, they could.
The information that was.
That is correct. They could.
So what was the question?
All it takes.
Can you repeat the questions? Would that be okay?
Pardon?
Can you repeat the questions? Would that be okay?
Yes.
Because we can't pick them up here. If that'd be
Oh,
okay.
okay.
Thank you.
The question that she asked was, if in fact a seller wanted to sell it, correct me if I'm wrong here, and they had to convert it back to a warranty deed, and the person, the party bought it, could they use the same information and then reestablish the land patent position? The answer to that is yes. What determines whether you can do that or not, you have to be the owner of record. Okay? That's like anybody in your chain of title could have done the same thing had they known or chose to do it. Yes?
Does your status as far as sovereign or not affect the land patent process?
Say the question again.
Your status. Like, for instance, I'm currently a slave to the state.
Okay.
Can I still get a land patent for my piece of property?
Now, define to me what your definition of slave to the state.
I'm under contract with the United States Marine Corps. I'm in contract with the federal government for various things, Social Security number, banking, all those things. I have signed away all those rights.
Right.
But can I still possess a land patent and be protected by in-law or by lawful?
Yes.
So
because you're a sovereign. You're sovereign by creation. Sovereigns can bring forth land patents. There are other supportive elements that would be a little bit of a problem, but as long as you're listed as the owner of that property, then you could bring the land patent forward.
So as a follow-up, in that position, I have a land patent, but at the same time I've entered into contracts. Would I then be obliged to pay taxes and
yes.
and do
Yes.
those things on the property?
Yes.
And that's where all those other people get in trouble.
That's right.
Okay.
You have a question over there.
Yes. I wouldn't forget you. Go ahead.
Back on the notice, the front page of the patent sandwich, page 118, number 3 has some language in there that says the patent, which is duly authorized to be executed in pursuance of the supremacy of treaty law. Can you just explain that a little bit more, what you mean by that treaty law? What treaty law are you speaking of?
Okay. Treaty law is specific to all treaties. And land was acquired by the United States government by way of treaties. You heard treaties between the Indians, you know, treaties between France and England, and we got Russia's property on a purchase, but that included a treaty as well. The treaty brings with it the authority and jurisdiction, because it's a conveyance of land outside of our system into our system without encumbrances to it. You with me? Without encumbrance. Hello? Without encumbrance. Okay? And so that authority and jurisdiction relative to treaty law allows the recipient of a land patent of which to have all the rights, title, and interest, and anything and everything having to do with that land patent belongs to you. Now I'm going to make it real simple, best that I can. That land patent is just not an issue of getting you a piece of land. There are other things that you inherit with that through the treaties. And the treaties have to be honored by our form of government. That's why we have Article 6, Clause 2. And it binds the courts The courts are the ones who are supposed to be determinators of law. Not the determination of, but the determinant of law. And in through that treaty, authority and jurisdiction binds those judges to never, ever interfere in their court proceedings that infringes upon that right and that property. Because not only do you get property, but you get rights with the property. Does that kind of in the direction of the question, or were you, so that I understand clearly your point?
Well, I still don't quite understand it. I mean, I understand what the Constitution says, but under treaty law, you're talking about the land that was acquired by the United States government from
That's
like,
right.
in this area, the Native Americans and the
That's
treaty of
right.
1855.
That right and entitlement to that land can never be diminished. It cannot be altered. Because in the treaties, if you go back and you read the treaties, that in essence it states that that land is conveyed to the United States on behalf of the people, not the government as the entity of government. They're the holders of that land and title and interest and authority and jurisdiction on your behalf. So that's why the treaties are mentioned in that particular portion of the document. Treaties have tremendous power. And treaties and flags are honored worldwide. You've heard the law of the flag, you've heard the law of treaty, the law of nations, all of that. The law of nations and the treaty goes clear back into Scripture. When that treaty is ratified and there's a conveyance of property, property never goes by itself. It always comes with the authority and jurisdiction that it accompanies that. That the treaty, the person conveying that to, relinquishes that over. That's the whole concept of the patent. When you do, you get everything. When you convey a patent to the next person, you are giving away not only the land, the disposing of the land, but the authority and jurisdiction to the recipient of that. So, and I don't know if I've answered your question. I'm trying to do best that I can, and best that I understand your question. Because treaties have power, is what I'm trying to say. And in that power of the treaty, then in essence, that goes wherever that land goes. That same full power, it's never diminished. That's why you always get authority and jurisdiction as well as the land. That's what I'm alluding to there in that document. That work?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes?
How is the land conveyed from one to another?
How is it conveyed from the government to us?
No,
or
from the sovereign to another sovereign.
Okay. It's done by a grant. You draft up a document, and then you can call it a land grant. You can call it a land conveyance grant. Number of titles you can put up, but you can just put grant as your heading. And that grant, I, Ron Gibson, do hereby convey and grant all rights, title, and interest from me, Ron Gibson, to Jim, Jack, and Joe on this date. I'm being very simplistic.
Right.
That's how you do it. You cannot sell the land. You cannot buy the land.
Right.
Land in its true form from soiling, if I can put it in that context, the land patent, it needs to be granted. You can sell the trees, you can sell the grass, if you're getting monetary payment for something, but you're given the land. Buy the building, buy the shed, buy the barn, whatever.
Now, once that is granted, does it need to be recorded?
Pardon?
Does it need to be recorded? After
Yes.
it's been granted?
Yes.
Just check.
The recipient of that in a land patent situation always has the burden to record.
Okay.
And your conveyance to another sovereign is not complete until it is conveyed. Okay?
Just making sure we had that process.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Can we poke a little more on the treaty issue?
Pardon?
Can we poke a little more on this treaty issue?
Sure.
For instance, France and the treaty versus the treaty with the Indian tribes here, is there a difference?
Is there a difference of them purchasing?
Is there a difference in the
Treaties.
treaties
Yes.
as far as the value, how it would affect us? as
No, no, it is not. It all goes into the trust pool on that, and it has the land and the authority and the jurisdiction. That all starts out even, Stephen, all the way across the board.
Very good, thank you.
Yes.
Yes, in the event of so-called con, and they change some of the Constitution, and there's always that threat that there's talk of it happening, how would that, or would it affect our land patents and also treaty law? Would the treaty law supersede a new Constitution? Would it go on with that?
Yes, the treaty law does supersede the lesser of value, the second Constitution. The second Constitution is the color of
law.
Yeah. It's not the original. It's representative being something that it's not. One little word that was changed in our Constitution. The original one, go look it up in the internet if you want. It says for the United States of America. That's the organic, the real McCoy. And they substitute one little word, put of in place of for. Changed a whole lot of stuff. Yes?
The national monuments that have become rampant and they extended to 2.5 million acres in Montana, is there a way to stop that and turn that around, or
Yes.
is there control it?
Yes. Very good question. The question was, with all these monuments and land withdrawals on there, on this very morning coming in, one of my researchers called me, and I'm having doing some work. And I had him go back and pull up the Wilderness Act. I want to encourage you to go read the Wilderness Act. There is a requirement of that Wilderness Act that has been violated since day one. Here's what they did. Pardon me. In 1960, they implemented, I believe in 1960, the Wilderness Act.
64.
And in spite of all of the good intentions, once bureaucrats got the thought that they would have power, and the environmental movement was getting started, one of the requirements, and I believe it's under number 4, was that there had to be a mineral survey that was done on all lands and within all proposed wilderness areas. They never did the mineral survey. And you're saying, well, why would they have to do a mineral survey? Remember earlier today I addressed H.R. 365 with you, which is the 1866 mining law? Do you remember that?
Yeah.
That mineral has already been disposed, granted to every one of you and I. Congress has no authority to redispose already disposed lands. And if the states were to get the land back, and there's a provision to do that, I'm not sure that they'll do it correctly, and I'm not being critical, but there's a process, a right way to do that. And that is on the basis that the United States government violated the Enabling Act with the state. They did not. It's called abridge the contract. Okay? And in doing so, then that obligation to relinquish that, the states can claim that back. I've got a book at home written by a good friend of mine, Robert Hill, and it's called Statehood. I want to encourage you to get that book. called statehood. He lays down very clearly the fundamental issues why the states have a right to get that land back. All of the western states have that right, because Congress violated it all.
The author again?
Pardon?
The author again?
Hill, Hill. I want to go back to the wilderness issue for a moment. It states in the Wilderness Act that in fact all the proposed lands have to have a mineral survey before. And the reason being, they cannot tie up a land that's already been predisposed relative to the mineral estate. So what does the government do? They went, well, we'd sure like to tie this land up and spend all this money. Do you realize how much money it costs to tie up land and the upkeep of that and the paperwork? Far more than if they'd let production come off of that land. There's a requirement of which the United States government said the Federal Bureau of Mines was to do a mineral survey before they could implement or pass an enactment having to do with tying up area for a wilderness area. So what they did, they just obliterated the Federal Bureau of Mines. And then they said, we don't have anybody to do the survey. So they just went it and did it anyway. And we sat there, some of us really screamed and hollered over that. And as soon as we're financially able, I'm the chairman of what's called the Jefferson Mining District. Largest mining district in the United States. And we get very, very heavily involved in land issues, in government proposals having to do with our public land. We drive them crazy. And I don't know if I shared it. She had a question. Excuse me. Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to add on, the national monuments are signed based upon the signature of the president alone, and it's part of the Antiquities Act that was supposed to be much more than a battlefield.
Exactly.
So, does the minerals requirement apply there? Or?
Yes. The mineral requirement is on all lands being proposed for withdrawal. That means wildernesses, that means monument areas, that means study areas, wildlife preserves, all of that stuff. Yes?
Are there any wilderness areas that they have done this study?
Pardon?
Are there any wilderness areas that they have done that?
Have they done the mineral survey? They did too.
Stillwater?
One of them is Econiopolis, down where I live, and one of them is in Alaska.
They did it on
The only
Stillwater,
two.
too. Down in
Pardon?
Nevada. They did it on the Stillwater too, down in Nevada.
Yeah.
But they recommended that they drop it, and Congress won't drop it.
Yeah. Yes?
Yeah, I just got a question on the land patents again, and I'm a little confused about the mineral rights going with the land patent. The mineral rights don't always necessarily go with it once you get it.
That is correct. That's why you can tell, if I'm understanding your question, that a land patent then in essence has a reservation on it. You may not get the mineral. Is that, am I hearing you correctly?
Well, I don't, do we get the minerals or don't we?
Would it be listed in there, whether it goes with it or not?
How you tell whether there's mineral goes with the land patent if it does not have a subject to clause on it. Whenever there is mineral that is known, the applicant for a land patent, they had to declare whether in fact there was mineral in character. Now that created a little bit of problem because a lot of those people were only farmers, they weren't miners. They didn't identify what was a mineral or what wasn't. So what they did, they went and got somebody who did know that helped them to make that decision. Because if you applied for a patent and it was mineral in character and the general land office found out, they jerk your patent, you lost it. So then he loses 5 years of hard work, sweat, and money. So when the Noble decision came down to address that issue, it really straightened up the land patent issue. And it's glad that they did, because the mineral estate was designed to be kept separate. That's why there's a mining law. Mining law is not one of many laws. It's set above and apart for a very particular reason, or reasons, if you will. Yes?
Is mineral, oil and gas, is that considered mineral?
I'm sorry,
Oil and gas, is that considered mineral?
Oil and gas considered mineral.
Yes, they are. But they're what's called leasable minerals. You have three categories of mineral. You have valuable mineral deposits, which is we call them locatable minerals. You have disposable minerals. That can be like an aggregate pit or petrified wood or whatever. Those are known as uncommon or common variety, and the locatable minerals are common. And then we have leasable minerals. The leasable minerals comes in most predominantly, not exclusively, but with, in fact, your oil and gas leases. They used to be under the locatable, but then when it finally realized to the government that, man, there's going to be a lot of wealth in this, and they wanted to 3D pause on it, so then they pulled that back, and then they kept that to lease. So whenever you do a lease on an oil or gas thing, you're dealing with the government. Yes?
So water isn't considered a lease item?
Pardon?
Water wouldn't be, subsurface water wouldn't be considered part of those leased items yet?
I'm not sure I understand the nature.
Well, well, you said oil and gas is typically subsurface, but so is water. But it's not considered in that category.
I know, water's not oil.
Right, I understand.
That's the reason. Simply because it's a petroleum-based product. There's water with oil, but it's not part of the equation as far as what's being leased.
So it's not considered a mineral.
No. Well, it is in practical composition, but not in the context that we're talking about here.
Yeah.
Everything on Earth is a mineral of some sort. Okay?
It's an element.
Element. Geothermal would be.
Yes. Quickly.
What's the difference between a fee patent and an allotment?
An allotment usually has a time period or condition on it. You're talking about a land allotment? Yeah. Most of those allotments have what they call restrictive covenants to it. In other words, they're usually designed for a specific purpose, or the intent of use is for a specific purpose. And so that's why they call it like a grazing allotment. Just to give you an example, it may not be kind of in the context that you're referring to. But a grazing allotment has limitations to it. Distance, the number of cattle, maybe how long in the year that you can put the cattle on, like the Bundy situation. And I've studied a lot about the Bundy thing. The government doesn't own that land, just to spit it out. Does that answer your question?
No, it's more of a tribal allotment from the federal government to a tribal member.
Okay. But in what context?
Well, in the context of selling it to somebody else, and underneath is a fee patent, or underneath is an allotment.
Right.
What's the difference?
Well, it depends. First of all, there are numerous types of allotments. So without seeing an example, if you please, it's kind of hard for me to answer that. The allotment is in the sense that instead of you owning it at fee simple, then in essence we're going to allow you to have that land or to use that land with condition, or for a time period, which is a condition, or whatever may be affiliated with that. Allotments can always be pulled back. A patent cannot. And I guess to separate the two from the context, if I understand your question, a land patent, once it's done and the 2-year period expires, it stands forever. An allotment can be a month, a year, 2 years, 5 years, whatever the terms and conditions are. Okay? Thank you for the question. Hang on a second. Yes?
Can you expand on eminent domain in regard to a land patent, highways, high transmission lines, those types of things?
Eminent domain means that the government can come in and in essence condemn the land. It's called a compensatory taking. But in an eminent domain claim, they have to pay you. That's what you're protected with under the Fifth Amendment. They have to give you due compensation. That's allowed by the Constitution for the betterment of the public good. And that's been honored for the most part until about the last 30 years. And then all of a sudden our government people began to be more greedy and wanted more power, so they wanted to take more land, and been a real fight. So when the people stood up, then they started sending their agencies to do the dirty work. Anybody recognize the EPA? The Forest Service? BOM? DEQ? Whatever. They were used as the hatchet men to go out there in the government. We don't know what they're doing. Our congressmen in our district got their butts blistered over the issue of not putting their agencies under control. The congressman says, and I quote, "We don't have any control over them." Bull crap. They're the agency that created, or the entity that created the agency. Okay? It's by Congress directive. They gave them authority, whatever that is. How many of you know what a revised statute means? Why isn't it just statute?
They made a revision.
It's been changed. In Oregon, we have a gentleman that sits at the Salem, and when the legislator makes a law, it's sent to this gentleman, and he manipulates it to fit the particular agenda. That's why it's called a revised statute. It is not what the legislator enacted. And it's totally fraudulent. It's totally contrary to law. But the general public doesn't know about it. Makes you kind of mad, doesn't it? Many of the legislative enactments are very good enactments. And the intent in the most instances is that. Once in a while they get popped off by, what do you call the people there that go in and try to persuade them?
Lobbyists?
Lobbyists, thank you. My mind went blank there. But a true legislator will get out in their district and they will talk to the common person. And that's not done near enough. And I know there's a lot of demand on their time. But I don't think you can be a good legislator without doing that. And find out what the will of the people is. And you folks need to stand up and say, hey, here's what I would like you to address. But when you do that, in respect of your legislator, make it so it's not a personal thing for just my benefit. Is it for the benefit of the majority? That's what a constitutional republic is supposed to do. But there's too much special interest. There's way too much money involved. There's too much corruption in it. And the only way you're going to fix it is to elect people with a godly heart and then monitor what they do. How many of you have seen the movie Goldie Hawn called Protocol? About 30, 40 years ago. You need to watch that movie. Kind of comical, you know, Goldie Hawn. But I'm telling you, she gets mixed up in government. And when she finds out what's going on, she addresses them, and I love her speech. And she says, and I quote, "From now on, I'm going to watch you like a hawk." because she saw the crap that went on behind the scene. You and I have that civil and moral responsibility to select good representatives and to get them in positions to do things for the betterment of all of you. But you also have a responsibility to monitor what they do. And a good representative is not afraid to stand up and say, hey man, I blew it. But you need to support them. Give them the support and let them know you're supporting them. Because there's some good ones out there. There's some real horses behind us too. And I'm honored to have you here today. Thank you for coming. We've got about 5 minutes or so. I want to finish. Hang on, just hold your hand. Yes, ma'am.
Just a quick question. What do you post on your property then? What does the sign state? Once the land patent is...
Very good question. The question was, what kind of a no trespassing sign do you post? You post on that this land is hereby posted by virtue of the power and authority of a land patent. Don't worry about using your state statutes to do that. They don't have the authority in the jurisdiction that your patent does.
Can you repeat that?
This land, this property, however you want to define it, is posted and protected by a valid land patent. While we have a moment, did I answer your question, ma'am?
Yes.
I want to take one more question, then I want to read you something. Yes?
When you mentioned before where you can have a land patent and you want to do business on your land or your ranch, you said don't put it on our corporate structure, do it personally under your own name. Then what if you get employees, if you want to do a ministry, or if you want to do ag, or if you want to do news ranch, that you have people on your...
You could do that without it being incorporated. Or you can create a corporation and lease that right by contract. You understand what I'm saying?
Ron, is that because the land patent cures it against a lawsuit?
Yes.
Yes.
It cannot be attacked.
It cannot be attacked. So if somebody twists their ankle or puts a nail through their thumb working for him, they can't sue him for personal injury.
He can sue him, they can't affect the land.
Correct. Okay.
The land is what is immune from attack. We're subject to attack because if we create a damage, that's common law. There has to be a victim. If you have a victim, then in essence, there's liability. Yes?
So I understand the personal liability that you can assume if you put it back in your name to bring forth the patent. But then if you create a corporation to run a business, aren't you now back in a contract with the government?
No, because the business doesn't own the land. That only affects it if the corporation is the landowner. You can function as a corporation and do anything that you want to do.
Well, what about building codes? Let's say you want to build a building on that land, but it's a corporation.
You let the landowner build a building that's not subject to that.
Even if they're one and the same?
Pardon?
Even if the landowner is also the owner of the corporation, they're one and the same?
I need to think about that a bit, okay? I've not run across that specifically. Look in your book, under your index in the front, and go to the trespass deal. I don't remember right now what page it does.
145.
145, thank you. I want us to read this before we depart tonight. Michigan jurisprudence has never recognized immunity on behalf of the city, village, township, county, or any administrative division, therefore from liability for trespass on private property. whether the trespass be for a long or short duration, and then it gives a court case there. Next paragraph down, the Fourth Amendment authorizes a person in the plaintiff's position as a proprietor of a business other than one who progressively regulated, such as trafficking of alcohol, liquors, to bar the governmental agencies from including inspections, carrying out police power, functions to protect public health and safety from his property, gives a court case. Common law and constitutional principles of government of sovereign immunity have never permitted government agents to commit trespass in violation of property rights. Hello? Gives a court case. Osborne versus Bank of the United States, last paragraph. Under the Federal Tort Claims Act, similarly, federal law enforcement officers are generally enjoy absolute immunity from tort liability, may nonetheless be held liable for damage for tort of trespass. Black versus Sheridan Corporation, etc., etc., etc. Accordingly, the plaintiff's complaint facially pleads a viable case of action for trespass as a constitutional tort.
So they're individually responsible. Law enforcement officers can be held individually responsible for breaking the law.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I lost the last part of that.
So
speak up loudly.
The law enforcement agency's not held liable. The individual law enforcement people are held liable.
That's correct. That's why whenever you have a lawsuit against a public employee, you want to sue them under what we define in law as a separate cover.
The individual.
That drags them out by their hair, if you please, from being defended by your tax dollars. And it's designed to do that. They have to pay for their own attorney, etc., etc., etc. Folks, I want to thank all of you. What a wonderful group you have been and are. This concludes our patent class. For those of you who'd like, we're going to go get a place to eat tonight. We'd like to welcome you all to visit some more, or questions that you may have, whatever. So